Hi everyone, my name is Reginald McKelvin, and in this video I'm going to analyze James Byrd's work, Sacred Scripture, Sacred War, and I'm going to focus specifically on the chapter called Teacheth My Hands to War and My Fingers to Fight. And I chose this chapter for a number of reasons. The analogies, metaphors, quotes, Bible verses were just phenomenal in this chapter. I specifically enjoy how Byrd connects colonial preachers, political leaders, and biblical figures. And in this chapter, they use King David to spiritually justify violence, inspire revolutionary action, and pretty much align America's cause with God's will. I think to be able to do that in one chapter is phenomenal. And I love that they use King David because King David can be seen in so many different perspectives. He's seen as this king, he's seen as this spiritual hero, he's seen as this skilled warrior, and he is one that kind of fits this idea of what America wants to be. And a lot of the colonial war sermons quoted some of the scriptures from the time that David was king. Specifically, in this chapter, they quote Psalms chapter 144, verse 1. Blessed be the Lord, my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. And they use this quote in an amazing way. They say that righteous warfare isn't just allowed, it's taught by God himself. And in simple terms, right, David being the psalmist and the soldier, basically he was this model for the colonial militias to get them to understand that their faith made their fight sacred. So they weren't just fighting for a cause, they were fighting for God himself. Or their fight in itself, because it was righteous, was not only allowed, but it was taught by God himself. I think that is just a phenomenal way to get people to rally to fight. And then the best part for me, and my favorite part in this chapter, was how they used the story of David and Goliath to modernize it. And they modernize it, right? You can probably understand who's David and who's Goliath, right? You have the colonial soldiers who are undertrained, under-resourced, and outnumbered. They're David, right? And then you have the British Empire, this mother country with the massive army, the global power and influence. They're the Goliath. And Byrd goes into detail and he references how the Continental Congress uses this metaphor, right? And echoes and says that America stood with its staff and its sling against this gigantic adversary, right? This idea of this Goliath, how are we going to beat it? But right, if you know the story and you know that if it is a righteous war, right, it's something God taught by God himself, what probably would happen. But my biggest piece of thing that I got from it was while they made sure to show David in a positive light, they didn't neglect to point out that at the end of the day, David was still a king, and the founders and their viewpoints for the Revolutionary War was anti-monarchist. So how can the Patriots reject monarchy but praise David, right? Because they're one and the same. And Byrd uses the sayings of Thomas Paine from his pamphlet on common sense. And he talks about how Paine reframes David as not as a ruler, but as a man after God's own heart because of his personal character and courage, not his crown. So his crown didn't define him as a leader, but his character and his courage and the fact that he sought God's heart and God's heart flowed through him made him not a ruler or the typical ruler. I don't know. But you also had ministers during this time who referenced David's failures, right? Like his sin with Bathsheba, and says that, the best kings come corrupted with power. But nonetheless, this was an amazing chapter. Thank you all for watching.